class. How are you? Hope you had a wonderful week studying social structure, which are the things that guide our behavior on a macro level of analysis. Now, today, I want to talk with you briefly about social interaction, which occurs on a micro sociological level. Social interaction are the things that guide our behavior on a small scale, face-to-face associations. And for review, which theoretical perspective falls under the micro level of analysis, that would be symbolic interactionism. So we're going to look at the symbols and different interpretations people have of different things and events and meanings. Okay. Now, the first component of social interaction, stereotypes. We talk about, we stereotype all the time. Now, if I were to ask you, on the board, and I wrote it in blue. It's probably not. I should have probably written it in red. Murder, embezzlement, and forgery. Now, if I were to give you 5 people, and I want you to tell me of the 5, which best describes the person that committed murder, committed embezzlement, which embezzlement is kind of like stealing funds from corporations, and forgery, who wrote the bad check. Here are the 5 individuals I'll give you. Middle-aged, white male, dressed in a suit. African-American man, slacks and a top, playing pool, around 35 years old. 25-year-old Caucasian woman, short hair, thin, dressed in a skirt and a top. Older woman walking dogs in a park. And Hispanic male standing by his airplane, about to get on a plane. If I were to ask you which one committed murder, which one was more likely to commit embezzlement, and which one was more likely to commit forgery, I know you would have your suggestions or answers of which one you think was most likely to have committed the crimes. In class, I do an exercise which also highlights this. Because, you could write down, okay, murder, I think it was the one she described that was this one or this one. Now, I can almost certainly predict that for embezzlement, you pick the middle-aged white guy in the suit. Okay. The others, perhaps the woman with the skirt and the top for forgery. I'm not sure. Now, the answer to who committed those crimes, none of the individuals whom I described. That's a qualifier. I'm talking just from a sociological example, and I do have real pictures of people I put on the board, but I didn't want to put them on the board for, the view on Facebook, on YouTube, and for this class. Okay, stereotypes. It's assumptions that people make about other people based on previous associations with similar types of people, or based on what we've been told about such people. Stereotypes really do define how we treat other people, which in turn influences how the other people define themselves. Example, what we've been told about such people. Have you ever met someone from a different culture? You either read things, heard things, watched movies about them, or somebody told you, oh, look out for so-and-so, or, people of this culture do X, Y, and Z. And then you met somebody from that culture. You're like, wow, they're nothing like what I thought they would be. That's an example of stereotyping. A personal example, when I was in South America for a conference, I was on the green talking with people from around the world. And this one guy from a place called Lesotho, which is southern Africa, he said, oh, you black people in America, you all are rich. I'm like, excuse me? And I know you all are chuckling too. And I said, why? The media that they received on blacks in America was Jet Magazine with a picture of Michael Jackson's Neverland or Whitney Houston's mega mansion in North Jersey. And I said, no. I said, not all black people live like that. I said, perhaps most don't. And I explained to him that, yes, we have poor and we do have wealth, but it's not just one way. But if the only thing you've been told about a certain people is, from print magazine, then that's going to clearly influence how you behave and what you think of them based on what you've been told. Okay, that's stereotypes. Now I ask you, what are some stereotypes that you've encountered or experienced about groups to which you belong? And so I can see your wheels turning. Have I been stereotyped before? If the state in which you live is New Jersey, and you go outside of the state of New Jersey, what's the stereotype you're going to get? A certain reality show? Okay, that's a perfect example. Yes, you've probably been stereotyped. And there are other instances, I'm sure. And I may actually add this as part of that conversations in sociology to talk about further, kind of elaborate on some stereotypes we've encountered. And now you don't have to answer this question, because if you run for political office, I don't want you to say, oh, well, in sociology class, so-and-so said they stereotyped this person or that person. So I'm not going to ask you to solicit responses for this. But also, think about times in which you stereotyped others and what was different about them. The reality is, as part of social interaction, we have all stereotyped other people. Second component of social interaction is personal space. We all have a personal bubble we use to protect our space. In class, I give some examples where I have people do exercise, but for this purpose, just think about when you were in a store. Have you ever been on a line in a grocery store and somebody's like right up next to you? And it just makes you feel very uncomfortable. Sometimes I've turned around and said, excuse me, can you kind of move back some? Yes, I do that because they're in your personal space. Have you ever walked up to somebody, or even let's say a friend, and you, excuse me, I had to bring the computer closer, and you perhaps just like touch their arm and they kind of flinch back, and you're thinking, my hands aren't dirty. That could be just their response to personal space. We all have a personal bubble. Sometimes we protect it by looking away, looking down, eye contact, hands, even professionally, a handshake. It's usually what, like, excuse me, shaking hand is usually within a certain amount of feet or from the other person. Okay. Edward Hall, an anthropologist, studied North Americans in personal space and came up with 4 distance zones. The first is the intimate zone, which is up to 18 inches. So I don't know if you can measure, but 18 inches would be kind of about here. So it would be someone who you're pretty close with. You usually know them in some capacity. The second distance zone is the personal zone. That's from 18 inches to 4 feet. You're familiar with that person, and you have a comfort level where you can get in that particular space. Social distance is 4 feet to 12 feet. In an actual classroom, next time you're in a classroom, notice the amount of space. Even like at let's say a pharmacy, a drugstore, look at the amount of space between the cashier and the customer. It's usually in that social space between 4 feet and 12 feet. And the last distance zone, public zone, is beyond 12 feet. I said, obviously the anthropologists did not study this in New York City because nobody has the luxury of 12 feet on the street as they're walking through the city. Okay, those are the 4 distance zones. The next concept I want to talk about with social interaction is dramaturgy. Erving Goffman, what he says is that everyday life consists of social actors playing assigned roles. So we are all actors. If you want to go apply for the next casting call and the director asks, well, what acting experience have you had? You can say, well, today I've been a student, I've been a driver, I've been a father, a mother, a son, a daughter, a child, brother, professor. Okay, so those are all examples of roles in which we've acted. According to Erving Goffman, we have a front stage when we are on. Like right now I'm on. I'm on stage because I'm now in the role front and center as professor. Then we have that backstage. And during the backstage is when we stop, relax, think about our presentations, prepare for future performances. Well, next time I do it, perhaps I'll do X, Y, or Z. Okay, think about an example. Maybe you're on the phone with someone, you have a conversation, you hang up, and you're like, I wish I said this, or I forgot to say that, or I don't feel like the conversation is finished. When you're having all those thoughts, that's when you're in your backstage. And then perhaps you pick up the phone and call the person back and say, oh, I just wanted to finish. I just wanted to say such and such, or clarify X, Y, or Z. All right, those are examples of front and backstage. For instance, I know when I record these sessions, I don't look back. I don't rewind. I just kind of, what you see is the first take. I may stumble over words or whatever the case, but I don't want to like look at my backstage because I don't think my backstage mind will ever be off because of course we are our own worst critics. So I refuse. I'm kind of like, okay, I'm getting the concepts out there and I don't want to look back and say, Dawn, you should have done this. You should have done that. Okay. But that's the backstage. Okay. We have different roles that we play in everyday life. Now, sometimes we encounter something called role conflict. That's conflict between two or more roles. That would be an example. Let's say you're a student. And let's say which you are, and let's say you have a friend in town, where the weather's kind of getting cooler, and it's like a beautiful 75-degree day, and it's kind of like, do I want to go to class, or do I want to log online, or do I want to go out with my friend and show them around, and perhaps go down to the shore? Okay, there's a conflict between those two roles, the role of friend, the role of student. Happens with work sometimes on a nice day, role conflict. Now, role strain is conflict within one single role. That would be an example of, let's say, a child of divorced parents on Thanksgiving. One parent wants you to go to their place. The other parent wants you to go to their place. There's a role. You are still within that role of child to both parents, but there's a strain. A parent, if you have two children, one child has a soccer game, the other one has a recital. You're a parent to both, but there's a strain within that one role. Which one do I go to? Okay. Goffman continues talking about impression management, how we try to control other people's impressions of us through signs, vehicles, teamwork, and face-saving behavior. The social setting is the stage where the action of everyday life unfolds. Social setting could be an office, a living room, a classroom. Okay. And we're really concerned about our appearance, how we dress for different things. We dress differently if we're going to a function, depending on who's going to be with us, okay, and where the function occurs. And then you can follow up things, the teamwork, how we have to bring more than one person in to actually have a performance, a duo, a duet, or future or additional people. For me, as a professor, the classroom's the setting. The teamwork comes in that I need the students to be there to listen, to nod, to ask questions, to respond. That's a teamwork performance right there, a professor and a student in a classroom. Because if there's just students and no professor, boy, that would be boring. Can you imagine even this class online if there was like, you didn't hear from me? I mean, I'm kind of like not around at all, not to email anything or not to post anything or not to assign anything. You need both to have that performance. That's an example of teamwork. And then face-saving behavior. Have you ever done things like you're walking and you slip and you try to play it off? Okay. That's face-saving behavior, how we try to clean up a role so that we don't appear to mess up that performance the next time. Okay. That's a little bit about dramaturgy. So those are some of the concepts of social interaction. I'm going to record on a different slide, a different video, just a couple last comments about this chapter. So I will see you shortly. Bye-bye.